orçamentos, fazemos programas espaciais sozinhos. Então, o que temos feito muito entre nós é, vamos à África do Sul com o meu irmão Ambulani e digo, Ambulani, eu não consigo fazer isso sozinho. E desenvolvemos algumas ferramentas juntos, formação juntos. Vou ao Ricardo, vou ao Temidaio, vou ao Dr. Ouattara e outros que estão aqui presentes, aqui a Mary, a Beza e Temidaio. Eu tenho dado a dizer, cooperação não é assinatura de memorandos. O Ambulani nem gosta de ouvir isso. Eu acho que cooperação é ação, prática e pragmatismo. Obrigado. Obrigado, Temidaio.
Thank you very much for that. Still on, public-private partnership.
I owe you a final. Sim, a sua pergunta ainda no PPP tem razão. E com todo esse aprendizado, quando o governo e Sua Excelência, Sr. Ministro, disse, Olana, nós agora temos dado o salto para o comercial. E, graças a Deus, o Sr. Ministro é um champion, como vocês viram aqui. Eu disse, Sr. Ministro, honestamente falando, se nós, Estado, estou a falar eu, GGPN, atenção, eu, GGPN, não acredito que o Estado, convencionalmente o Estado, é bom em vender, é bom em inovar, Temidaio. E o que é que nós fizemos? Nós olhamos para a nossa praça angolana, aquelas empresas que eram altamente inovadoras e que podíamos fazer aqui uma parceria PPP em que nós passávamos o know-how sobre a tecnologia espacial e eles tratavam da inovação e vendas. Foi assim que nasceu o GEDAI, há um ano. Vamos agora celebrar essa sexta-feira 1 ano e o novo passo que vamos dar, em que foi difícil, mas conseguimos convencer a Africell. Desculpa, foi uma ideia quase maluca, mas eles perceberam o potencial. E Temidaio, eu com muito orgulho que nós hoje somos parceiros da Africell neste modelo já há 1 ano e correu tão bem que agora vamos escalar esta operação. Temidaio, eu acho que, muito honestamente, este exemplo, nós queremos multiplicar em Angola. Porque a única razão que nós vamos conseguir dinamizar a economia, o Sr. Ministro falou muito aqui no seu discurso, é deixar o setor privado liderar. Eu acho que nós, Estado, falo como GGPN, devemos apenas regular, supervisionar, senão nós vamos impedir o crescimento desse ecossistema. Porque eu digo sempre, nós, como Estado, às vezes, isso, global, não só em Angola, tende a ser um pouco mais burocrático, um pouco mais lento. O cliente tem padrões de alta exigência que nós não temos capacidade de dar. É aí onde parceiros como a Africell, hoje assinamos um memorando importantíssimo com a Unitel, a maior operadora. Nós queremos multiplicar esses grandes exemplos com um grande fim. Gerar emprego para toda essa juventude, como disse bem o Ricardo, e eles liderarem, e nós irmos à reforma. Eu acho que deve ser essa a estratégia. Obrigado. Okay.
Thank you very much. Historically in Africa, for a lot of the countries, for example, that started their space program several years ago, one of the fundamental problems we saw in Africa was that governments would fund national space programs. So they would invest heavily in building infrastructure, in building manpower, but there was not a lot of economic return. There was not a lot of money coming back to the government. Government was spending a lot, and sometimes there were qualitative return on that investment. There was no quantitative return. So government could spend $50 million on the space program, but you can quantify how much they were getting in return. And one of the things that some countries started doing were, going into the private sector. So national space agencies would set up private companies, and in some countries it worked. In some countries, it didn't work. And so it's very interesting to see how you are taking the lessons from, from all of these historical, events, to see how to model a public-private partnership in a way that you can provide the technologies, but actually allow, the experienced business people to take the charge and at the end of the day bring economic return to the country. So that's very good. Thank you very much. And still on private, sector, I want to come to, Engineer Mary Walker. For a little bit of background, she is the co-founder and CEO of Symphony Space. So from your perspective, as a private space company operating at the frontier of innovation, what do you think is the biggest untapped commercial opportunity in Africa's digital transformation journey that space technology can actually unlock?
Yeah, thank you so much. And when I think of space, I think of a trip I took to NASA Goddard to go visit the Nancy Grace telescope. Has anyone been there? So what that telescope is doing is that instead of looking really deep into space, it's looking wide to try to categorize and count really, how many solar systems are out there. And they made an estimation that if every solar system was a grain of sand, we would have 10,000 more grains of sand than there are grains of sand on the beaches on this planet. Now, if you think about the scale of space, nearly infinite space, and how rare we are as a planet to be here, to be breathing, to have tremendous biological diversity, to be able to live ostensibly in harmony, this is a phenomenal thing. And so when I think of opportunity, I don't think of it necessarily purely as a commercial opportunity. I think of it as opportunities for humanity and for the advancements and for the generational leaps in discoveries and innovations that we're going to have, not over our lifetime or children's lifetime, but over many generations to come. And that's why I'm so very excited about space. Who watched the recent Artemis II launch, the return to moon, and they circled the moon and they came back? I think most of you did, but maybe the translation's not catching up. And I was down in Florida, watched the launch. I think you were there too. I was there with my children, and I just thought, wow, this is an amazing, inspirational, fundamental milestone that I'm going to keep for the rest of my life, and I know it's going to inspire my children and their entire generation as well. And then I think back to, the original Apollo mission, and I, think several people, my parents' generation, they were able to witness that as well. So what happened after that mission took off in the United States? There were over 400,000 new PhD and graduate students that enrolled in STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, math programs in the United States. Now that was 60 years ago. What did that gradually become? That was the catalyst for what will eventually become an over $2 trillion industry. $2 trillion industry within the next 10 years. And that's all because we came around a central goal, and we were talking about government investment. The return on investment does not come within 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, or 60 years. It comes over lifetimes and generations. And so these are figures, these are figures that we throw around, but these are important figures because what it represents, again, is the opportunity. And so what we're kind of at right now is this convergence of incredible advancements. And many researchers and technologists see this as, time unlike others. You look at AI and the ability for compute. You look at biotechnology and the discoveries that are being made there. And then you look at space not really as, just a destination for astronauts to go, but as a true operating environment. And for me, that is really what's exciting. Using microgravity to do experiments on biotechnology, proteins fold up into these 3D structures in microgravity in ways that they don't do on Earth. And the discoveries that are made there can, present the cure for cancers, for Parkinson's disease, and many other diseases that, over 50% of the global population at some point will encounter. That's just one small part of the equation. And so what we're doing at Symphony Space is we're building infrastructure, permanent infrastructure in space, autonomous modular space stations, so that we can enable smart people like you to go out there and to do these experiments and to be able to push really humanity to the next segment. So we talk about, planetary intelligence. I think that's really what it is. We're getting able to understand our planet better. We're being able to understand our solar system better, able to discover new materials and ways that will fundamentally change how things work on this planet and beyond.
Thank you very much. We've looked at government to government collaboration. We've looked at public-private partnership and even the private sector. But there is another category of professional societies that also play important role in the ecosystem. And this brings me to Engineer Beza Tesfaye, who, for a little bit of background, is the Vice President of the Board of Directors of the Ethiopian Society for Space Sciences. And so professional and scientific society play an underappreciated role in building space ecosystem, advocating for policies and connecting talent. What concrete impact has Ethiopian Space Society for Space Sciences had on national capacity building? And what sort of model would you export to other African countries like Angola?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Temdao. So Ethiopia brings a very interesting and unique space development. The Ethiopian space development did not follow the traditional development where the government starts space program and then the people and then a different institution follows. In Ethiopian case, when we started back in 2004, space is a new thing, and especially back then Ethiopia was very poor. And we proposed for the government to start a space initiative, but the government response was, oh no, Ethiopia is very poor, we don't need space now. We have immediate danger, like poverty to deal with. And it was very discouraging back then. But what happened next was a group of interested people, judges, business owners, and some politicians as well as scientists come together and formed this space society. And since then until 2012, we did a massive public advocacy, policy work, and of course going to the universities and networking about 32 universities to be an advocate for a space as well as to add a space component into their education. And then with that, in 2012, the society managed to build a $4 million research infrastructure. That was happened by only the society capacity. And then the government started to realize that, okay, I'm paying for internet, I'm paying for, media and communication, and then some other, aspect of developmental aspects. And then we helped the government to realize that Ethiopia is already using space technologies. And we're already paying and investing in indirect way. And finally, the government realized that and then accepted the society and transformed the society effort into legitimate government institution. So what the society did is that it established government-owned an institution that supports the current program that we're running. So the society brings a model to other African countries who are still waiting for the government to really open a space initiative programs. I think the Ethiopian case shows that you might not need to wait for the government to start it. You can started as a grassroots level movement and build the ecosystem, probably work with the universities to really work on the capacity development aspect, as well as, most importantly, to inspire the young generation within the countries. Right now, the Ethiopian Space Science Society has more than 200 school network, 32 university network, as well as more than 15,000 individual members that are supporting the space cause. I would say this is a huge achievement in terms of guiding the government into the right direction to develop the space program in the country.
Thank you very much. I want to come back to Mr. Mudau. So Africa has extraordinary, Earth observation requirements, from climate resilience to agricultural productivity to infrastructure planning. I mean, we saw the presentation from, ANGP, on how they're also capitalizing on Earth observation data for the oil and gas sector. But, more importantly, much of the EO data that we're actually using are coming from foreign satellites on foreign terms. What is your vision for a truly African-owned EO infrastructure data architecture? And what role would SANSA, play in this?
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to try and be diplomatic, right? But I think as Africans, we need to wake up. This is a harsh reality for us as South Africa, particularly looking at how we use satellite data for a number of applications, very much advanced. When you're talking about planetary intelligence, we're talking Earth intelligence. And what do we mean by that? It's an integration of your 4IR with population data as well as your space-based data so that you can begin to transform knowledge into action. And we've seen what's happening with the extreme climate events that are happening. In South Africa, you may have followed this year and last year in part of Limpopo where we've lost lives. 3 weeks back in the Western Cape, the same. We host the UN Office on Disaster, right? Which is linked to the charter itself, the UN Charter. But what we're learning because of the over-dependence in acquiring satellite imagery from foreign data providers is that you are unable to build models. You are unable to begin to do what we call scenario planning and scenario modeling because you just do not have sufficient satellite data. And what's costing South Africa today, particularly when you're looking at dealing with disaster preparedness, is that the synthetic aperture radar data and whatever that's available right now, whether it's Sentinels and so on, it's just not sufficient for you to be able to respond to this. And therefore, our position is very clear. And I just want to remind everybody here, perhaps when we conceptualized the African Resource Monitoring Constellation, it was just too early for that, and it's a model that I think we need to go back as Africans and say, how do we co-design, co-build, and build these constellations to ensure that we provide seamless data coverage of Africa. There are still parts of Africa that's not mapped at all. There are still parts of Africa that we know there's no connection or connectivity. And it takes us as leaders of space agencies to come and work as a collective and begin to deal with this. So until such time, we as Africans can direct our resources, our natural resources, which we're well endowed with, by managing those resources and monitoring them, and begin to look at what percentage of our GDP, our gross domestic product, should be invested in space as a collective, not as South Africa, not as Angola. But this has to be a deliberate effort by the African Union, by the African Union Commission, to begin to say, let's engage with all heads of space agencies and look at how we can influence our government right now. We in South Africa, because of our geographic advantage, we generate quite a lot of money by hosting. We host the largest ground segment in the Southern Hemisphere. We've engaged with my brother here on how we could build that business so that we can reinvest some of the money that is being generated by some of our facilities. And therefore, for me, what's going to be critical, it's a concerted effort by the heads of the African space agencies coming together and say, let's work towards building the constellation. We are seeing pocket of excellence in industries here, in Angola, in South Africa. Our upstream segment is very dynamic. It's selling components and subsystems to the global community. We are very deliberate in building the downstream. We are investing in startups, startup companies. And therefore, for me, what's going to be critical, Temi, is that we need to be deliberate as Africans and work together. We have nothing to compete for, and we have nothing to gain if we continue with the competition that we see in some instances. And therefore, we can't continue to be just, consumers of foreign technologies. We need to be in charge of our national space program and invest deliberately to build capacity as well as capabilities for the African continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me come back to Engineer Conde, talking about ecosystem development, basically. So, Portugal's space grew from fewer than 50 companies to about 87 companies in the ecosystem in a few years. What specific policy mechanism, incubation support, procurement preferences, or program, was most effective in growing this sort of ecosystem? And, what lessons can countries like Angola learn from this as they try to grow the commercial ecosystem here?
Yeah, this is what I mentioned before. I will switch to Portuguese again, okay. Nós temos que falar em inovação. Países pequenos só têm um caminho, é o caminho da inovação. Porque senão nós estamos a replicar o que os outros estão a fazer. É por isso que eu há pouco dizia, senão estamos a trabalhar para o passado. A inovação está necessariamente... O que é inovação? Inovação é fazer o que não foi feito. Pensar o impensável. E isto só é feito através de um espírito empreendedor. E este espírito empreendedor é aquilo que as novas gerações trazem para aquilo que falamos aqui, sobre a ambição, sobre o conhecimento e sobre também um posicionamento naquilo que é a cadeia de valor. Muitos dos nossos jovens que estão aqui querem formar as suas próprias empresas. Querem ter um papel naquilo que se chama a economia espacial. Há vários instrumentos que são possíveis, são tangíveis, estão dentro daquilo que é a nossa possibilidade, e foi isso que nós fizemos durante muito tempo, e estamos a fazer agora, noutra escala, que é lançar as bases para criar, dimensões de empreendedorismo. Criar startups. Nós sabemos que a maioria vai falhar. Mas isso é como nos negócios. Se nós tivermos 8% a 10%, aqueles que se forem bem-sucedidos permanecerão, trarão escala, trarão futuro. Mas é trabalhar em campos onde de facto está a inovação. E a inovação não é só naquilo, nos rockets, nos astronautas, na permanência em órbita, é também, por exemplo, no downstream, na forma como nós utilizamos dados, transformamos em informação, na forma como nós também fazemos nossos pequenos subsistemas, por exemplo, para sistemas de navegação em satélites. Como é que nós, de alguma forma, vamos olhar para aquilo que é talvez o potencial não realizado que alguns países pequenos têm com esta juventude para, de facto, ter dimensão criativa para ter um setor espacial vibrante. Os países pequenos não têm uma dimensão que consigam competir com esta dinâmica de escala que há a nível global. Nós vemos que aquelas megas constelações que estão a ser lançadas, algum país pequeno tem esta capacidade? Só a federação de vontades, por exemplo, nós estamos a fazê-lo com Espanha, estamos a fazê-lo com a Itália, quero estender isto também aqui a Angola, quero federar uma capacidade para nós termos, por exemplo, informação em near real time ou real time. Isto não está ao alcance de pequenos países com pequenos orçamentos, mas está ao alcance de uma capacidade de cooperação e de federação, por exemplo, de constelações. Isto está ao nosso alcance. Portanto, mas para isso é preciso nós descentralizarmos, e o Zolana falava isto muito bem, colocarmos nas nossas universidades, colocarmos na nossa juventude essa ambição. Eu gostava que todos os nossos jovens aqui sonhassem que em 4, 5 anos pudessem ter algumas empresas em que seriam o motor do programa espacial também angolano. E aí fazermos as nossas funções como agência espacial, que é regular, fazer os programas, os frameworks, para dar esta continuidade. É por aqui, aliás, este modelo é aquilo que o modelo também, enfim, mais liberal dos Estados Unidos aplica. Por exemplo, nós estamos a viver neste momento uma expectativa da utilização dos sistemas espaciais naquilo que é a segurança e a defesa. A segurança e a defesa são, de facto, um embrião de capacitação de todo um ecossistema, e nós vemos isto na Europa. Há budgets infinitos para a capacitação espacial, para a segurança e para a defesa. O orçamento dos Estados Unidos para o espaço, mais de metade é oriundo da defesa. Ou seja, oil and gas, agricultura, o ambiente, todo aquilo que é a soberania, a própria soberania digital, a segurança e a defesa, são as dimensões da construção daquilo que são os pilares de um setor espacial, em que reverte daquilo que é o moto da nossa conferência hoje, a soberania digital, a transformação digital. Portanto, é nestas dimensões, na criatividade, no empreendedorismo, nas startups, que de alguma forma está a esperança de um país de conseguir alterar ou criar, digamos, um setor, e depois, obviamente, na cooperação internacional, que é algo que enfim, estamos a trabalhar neste sentido, também a ver esta cooperação também com Angola, no sentido também de dar dimensão aos 2 programas espaciais e com isto também dar dimensão, obviamente, aos continentes de onde nós pertencemos. O TDN tem uma missão pela frente titânica, a construção de uma ideia de uma agência espacial africana. Nós já fizemos esse processo na Europa, é mesmo complexo, mas exige aqui uma aproximação constante, uma colaboração constante e, obviamente, a construir algo comum constante. Eu sou muito apologista de termos programas comuns entre países e depois também, obviamente, entre regiões, entre a Europa em particular e entre a África. Obrigado.
Thank you very much. He highlighted a lot of, building the next generation through trainings, support for startups, hackathons, and things like that. And as part of these ANGOTIC, we have training programs for students. We have some professors from some of the world's leading universities here that will be training students and young professionals as part of the program. We also have a hackathon that is going on both upstream and downstream segment of the space industry. If you want to get more information about this, you can go to the GGPN booth outside, and they'll provide this information to you. Coming back to Dr. Zhao, so I have two questions for you. So one is I want you to give some update on the SADC shared satellite project, and the second is on ANGOTIC 2. You've sold over 90% of your C-band capacity already, which is a remarkable commercial milestone for government-owned satellite. How are you balancing between, commercial revenue generation and ensuring national digital sovereignty and, social connectivity objectives are not crowned out?
Obrigado, Migdaio. Thank you for the question. O projeto partilhado da SADC é, no fundo, exemplo concreto daquilo que o Ricardo acabou de mencionar. Criamos federações, programas espaciais federados, uma decisão dos ministros da SADC, que, no fundo, o MINTIX tem estado a liderar isso a nível político. E o que nós fizemos nos últimos 6 anos foi, de fato, aqui um progresso bastante bom, porque conseguimos hoje já ter posições orbitais, e aquilo explicando à audiência, conseguimos identificar um lugar onde podemos colocar o satélite da SADC, que é um trabalho titânico para muitos especialistas que estão aqui na sala, devem imaginar. Então, estão lançadas as condições para começarmos então a trabalhar na próxima fase, que já começamos, que é desenhar o programa espacial da SADC. Já temos os termos de referência desenhados, e o que nos alegra bastante é que até agora tem sido um modelo daquilo que também aqui com o Dr. Tediano, na União Africana, vamos tentar explorar e como podemos escalar a nível de todo o continente. A boa nova é que, se tudo correr bem, o próximo ano estamos em condições já de começar a fazer procurement, identificar parceiros para começarem então a construir um satélite regional para diminuir custos drásticos. Os estudos preliminares que fizemos é se os 16 países se unirem para construir este satélite, vamos poupar cerca de 250 milhões de dólares coletivamente, é significativo, e é um dos esforços primários que nós temos estado a fazer. Bem, a segunda questão, Temidaio, penso que, e depois ajuda-me a dizer se recebi, por um lado, acho que foi muito sobre a estratégia comercial, não é isso? Ajuda-me só a lembrar, faz favor.
Yeah, the question is about ANGOTIC 2. So, you've commercialized, a lot of the resources. So how are you finding a balance between, revenue generation and sovereignty?
O problema do ANGOTIC 2, o sucesso da comercialização nasce de um problema. Eu digo sempre às pessoas que os sucessos surgem sempre da necessidade de um problema. E o ANGOTIC 2, quando colocamos em órbita, como sabem, tivemos um grande trauma, porque tivemos a falha que houve em 2017 e havia muito cetismo entre nós, e principalmente as pessoas do setor não acreditavam que isso seria possível. Quando lançamos o ANGOTIC 2 em 12 de outubro de 2022 e com sucesso, então cai-nos a real que precisávamos ter os modelos comerciais para acelerar as vendas. E, no nosso espanto, o modelo inicial, a estratégia inicial era que o do GGP não havia de comercializar, mas sim outros parceiros. Mas houve uma decisão do governo e fomos chamados e fomos informados que o GGP também devia comercializar. Então, como devem imaginar, o GGP não estava preparado para comercializar. Tivemos que nos reinventar rapidamente, Temidaio. E aqui eu sempre dizia às minhas equipas, eu gostei daquilo que o Ricardo disse, o segredo é inovar e não reinventar, no fundo, aquilo que já está feito. E de forma que a forma rápida de inovar foi identificar exatamente aqueles que já fazem esse trabalho na nossa praça, com muito sucesso, parceiros regionais, e entramos em campo, não é? Também foi necessário assim como a ANPG, ter aqui alguns parceiros que acreditaram que o ANGOSAT 2 tinha valor, como o caso da Infrasat, como o caso da MS Telecom, a Mercury hoje, a própria Unitel, e eles praticamente é que esgotaram essa capacidade, só para termos uma ideia. A banda C, nós comunicamos no ANGOSAT 2 em 2 bandas de frequência. Uma das bandas chamamos C, a outra KU. Na banda C, que cobre todo o continente africano e parte do oeste da Europa, foi esgotada só em Angola, para vermos a qualidade deste satélite, e podem consultar o nosso stand, quem quiser. E, Temidaio, o balanço, penso que falaste um pouco também sobre a questão da soberania, não é? Dos dados e não só. O que nós também tentamos fazer com o ANGOSAT 2, desde o início do projeto, orientação do Estado e do Governo, é que tinha que ser feito por angolanos. E no início, há 14 anos, nós pensamos que ia ser impossível. Fomos forçados a não ter consultores e, tem uma ideia, eu acho, a questão da soberania, projetos dessa natureza, a única forma de garantir a soberania é ser feito por nacionais, por angolanos. É a única forma. Eu ouço muitas pessoas a falar em soberania de outras formas. A melhor forma é ter angolanos, locais, capacitados. É a única forma de garantirmos a soberania a todos os níveis. E foi assim que fizemos, Temidai. Também um pouco desse sucesso é porque isso é feito mesmo por uma equipa de angolanos. Mas também eu não quero levar os créditos todos. Nós temos muitas pessoas que têm aconselhado. Por exemplo, temos aqui na sala a embaixadora Cândida Teixeira, que na altura foi uma grande conselheira e ajudou-nos a caminhar bastante, está aqui sentada à nossa frente. Temos a professora Danielud, que também há quase já uma década tem sido uma grande conselheira, a professora do MIT, onde senta o conhecimento, a professora Semita, da Namíbia, e outros. Temidai, também não se fazem essas coisas sem grandes conselheiros. É o que eu queria também para fechar. Obrigado.
Thank you very much. I want to come back to Engineer Walker. So the narrative around space in Africa, often focuses on governments and agencies. What do you think would take to build a genuinely thriving private space innovative ecosystem on the continent? Policy, environment, talent pipeline, capital infrastructure, what sort of things do you think need to be in place?
Okay, awesome. Well, first I want to speak to Ricardo really quick, because you mentioned, innovation is doing things that haven't been done before. And then Dr. Zolani, you mentioned, we also have to use the amazing advancements that have already been made. And I think innovation is really at the crux of that. And so interestingly, I just heard of this startup, and instead of launching rockets, they've built a giant gun, like a giant gun, and they're shooting payloads into space. And I thought that was really funny, because I'm like, oh, that technology already exists, but just the application of it. And then it's innovative because we don't have to use all that propellant and all that fuel. Anyways, speaking of launches, SpaceX has been on my mind quite a bit. If any of you have been following the SpaceX IPO that's coming up, it's a historic IPO, $1.4 trillion. It already has, and it will fundamentally change what the capital markets look like for the space economy. For the young entrepreneurs, for the older entrepreneurs, any age entrepreneurs, this is an amazing time to be in space. I would say you're very lucky. This is the right time and place. Other technologies have matured to the point where we can leverage them and then bring them into space as well. And so it's very exciting. The reason I mentioned SpaceX is, and then we go back to public-private partnerships, is SpaceX would not exist if it were not for public-private partnerships. When SpaceX was first launching, no pun intended, they were trying to get a government contract. NASA was trying to decide between SpaceX and there was another high bidder. I cannot name who. And the decision was made literally down to the 11th hour. People were running to Congress, lobbying them, saying, you gotta choose SpaceX. And the argument was, my God, they just blew up 4 launchers. We're going to sink another bajillion billion dollars into this company that is failing. And the competition was not an American company, I'll just put that way. And the decision was made from a national security perspective. We need to invest in an American company, even if they are going to fail in the beginning. They will return on the investment later. And look at how it's grown. The most historic IPO ever in history, redefining what capital markets will look like, space industry or otherwise. And so I think what's really important for governments is to be an early believer. You have to be a startup's first customer, if not the first customer, the second customer, and put your trust and your weight behind them. Hedge the risk that so many startups have to take on their own. Because the investors that are out there giving the capital, their requirements for return on investment are similar to SaaS. 10x investment, a return on investment within 18 months. That is not realistic for the space economy. That is heavily CapEx intensive. And so for governments to help bring down some of that risk, to help absorb that, whether that's from an R&D perspective or from just a contracts perspective or grants. This is very, very important if you want your domestic space ecosystem to survive.
Thank you very much. Because we've now run out of time, I'll just take a final remark from everyone.
Let me just say something about what is innovation.
Yes, and do that with your final remark.
Imagine that you have a cow, that you have a milk, you have a coffee, and I have the cappuccino. So that means the cappuccino is innovation. So you have coffee, and you have the milk, and you have a cappuccino. This is what we need to also to look as a perspective of the dimension of space, to really look for new payloads. AI has a tool embedded. For example, new propulsion systems. New capacity to understand the territory. What you present, particularly here, oil spills monitoring, this is quite innovative. And it's a real case. And this is also what we need to prove and to show that space is delivering. Space must deliver. It's a benefit for society. And if the society will start to see their space start to deliver, the approach to their needs, I think space become a commodity. And this is something that we really also need.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I can't take other remarks because we have to end the panel now. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. There are more, sessions dedicated to space in the agenda, so please look up to them. We're going to take a group picture now, and afterwards, we invite everyone to the upstairs. GGPM will be signing several MOUs, so we invite you to witness that. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Obrigado a todos pela presença. Vamos só tirar aqui a famosa foto da família. Informar a todos também que serão assinados acordos na sala 8 lá em cima. Já a seguir, tal como o Temedaio acabou de mencionar. Também duas alterações aqui. Melhor, uma alteração e uma informação sobre uma das paralelas. A paralela de soluções geoespaciais inteligentes para a transformação digital em países emergentes vai ser aqui nesta sala. E também está a ser realizada neste momento, já arrancou, e eu sei que há convidados também aqui que estavam interessados nessa paralela, que é a paralela sobre as fintechs, ecossistema fintech em Angola, inovação, talento e escala, está a decorrer na sala C4, é uma das paralelas, e na sala C4. Então, acho que daqui a pouco começa a paralela sobre soluções geoespaciais inteligentes para a transformação digital em países emergentes. Vamos só esperar que venham os moderadores e os integrantes, então, dessa conversa. Obrigado.
temple left by our soul descendants in a quest for peace, energy, and light? If you would find this temple, do you have the knowledge to enter the temple? Do you want it? And if you had it, would you flaunt it? Well, it's yours.
It blows, ignite, and flow and soar into you. Let the fire burn within you, hold it, now it's yours. If you feel it in your soul, follow the light, go through the storm.
Acquiring entrance to the temple is hard but fair. Trek through God-forsaken elements because the reward is well worth the journey. Stay steadfast in your pursuit of the light. The light is knowledge. Do you want it? And if you had it, would you flaunt it? It's
As it blows, ignite, and flow and soar into you. Let the fire burn within you, hold it, now it's yours. If you feel it in your soul, follow the light, go through the storm.
You stay true to your quest. So let the beauty that is the musical universe engulf you. Recharge your spirit, purify your mind, touch your soul, and give you the eternal joy and happiness you truly deserve. You now have the knowledge. Do you want it? And if you had it, would you flaunt it? Well, it's
As
yours.
it blows, ignite, and flow and soar into you. Let the fire burn within you, hold it, now it's yours. If you feel it in your soul, follow the light, go through the storm.
Well, it's yours.
cabo lá interessante.
Hello? Okay. Muito boa tarde a todos. Nós vamos já começar com um painel Soluções inteligentes. Soluções inteligentes para a transformação digital de países emergentes. Eu gostaria de saber da audiência se estão confortáveis com o painel totalmente em inglês ou gostariam de que as perguntas pelo menos fossem feitas em português. Se estão-se confortáveis com a primeira opção, então, atendendo a que todos os painelistas são estrangeiros, então vou fazer a apresentação em inglês, para conforto da maioria. Good afternoon, everyone. We are on the last panel of the first day of ANGOTIC, and we appreciate a lot the fact that you remain with us to hear more about smart geospatial solutions for digital transformation in emerging countries. So, geospatial technologies are increasingly becoming a cornerstone for digital transformation strategy worldwide by integrating satellite imagery, geographic information system, GIS, artificial intelligence, IoT, and advanced analytics. Governments and business can improve decision-making, optimize resource management, and enhance service delivery. For emerging countries, smart geospatial solutions offer unprecedented opportunities to address development challenges while accelerating economic growth, industrial modernization, environment sustainability, and social inclusion, from smart cities to precision agriculture, from planning to disaster management. Geospatial intelligence is enabling more efficient and data-driven governance. This section will explore how geospatial technologies are driving digital transformation across key sectors and how emerging economy can lever on those tools to build resilient, sustainable, and inclusive digital ecosystem. We'll have on our panel Jean-Louis Belin for Airbus Defense Space, Dr. Hama Afulu for SatList, Prof. Dr. Abel Ramuelo for South African Space Agency, SANZA, Ms. Selina Hayes for Hayes International Group, and Brian Baltimore for AfriCell Angola and JEDI, the Angola Geospatial Data Center. And we expect to have good outcomes of our discussion today. For the first, I will let all the panelists to introduce themselves, speak who they are, what is their position, and a little bit of their companies or institution they represent. I will start with Prof. Abel Ramuelo.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Luciano. First of all, I want to thank the government of Angola and GGPEN as well for inviting us, and then also the leadership of GGPEN. My name is Abel Ramuelo, as introduced. I'm the Executive Director for Earth Observation Program at the South African National Space Agency. Our space agency has been created to promote the use of space and strengthen cooperation in space-related activities while fostering, the research in space science, advancing scientific engineering, through developing human capital and then also supporting industrial development in space, technologies. Then we coordinate all space-related activities in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Luciano. Thank you I would like to thank GGPN for inviting us as Airbus to participate to this panel and this conference. So I am Jean-Louis Bellon. I am a country manager for Airbus Group, belonging to the specific business unit. So you know Airbus as an aircraft manufacturer. We have also activity in defense and space. And specifically, I belong to a business unit within the Airbus Group who provide satellite imagery services and geospatial services and telecommunication services. So that's what we do. We, as Airbus, are partner from Angola and GGPN by providing satellite, an Earth observation satellite that will be launched in a few months. And thanks you again for inviting us to this panel.
Good afternoon, good evening. I'm Brian Baltimore, the Chief Projects and Customer Experience Officer at Africell Angola, and an executive committee member of the joint venture between GGPN and Africell Angola, JEDI. Africell Angola is the largest US-owned mobile operator in sub-Saharan Africa. We've been operating in Angola for just under 4 years, and we're very proud of our trajectory so far in the country, especially looking towards where we envision going, not only as a sort of standalone business, but also through our partnership with GGPN.
Good afternoon. My name is Selena Hayes. I'm the CEO of Hayes Group International and Critical X Materials. I first want to say thank you to our host, the Angolan government, and to GGPN for this esteemed invitation to present here and with our esteemed panelists. So my company has developed a geospatial platform that focuses primarily on mining and artisanal mining on the continent of Africa. And I look forward to talking a little bit more about how geospatial can be applied into the commercial world. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rama Ochieng Afulo. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Satellite. We're nearing our 2-year mark now, so exciting. Thank you to GGPN and the Angolan government for inviting us over here. What we do at Satellite is we create virtual AI data centers in space. So we turn satellites into nodes thereof. We're looking for the operational efficiency of these satellites and attacking the largest cost center for satellites outside of building the satellite and launching it, which is sending the data down. More than happy to dive into some discussions there, and we'll be signing an MOU with GGPN tomorrow, I believe. So looking forward to the conversation.
Okay. Our first question, my first question will be for Prof. Abel Ramuelo. On the last plenary section that we had here, we had, for example, NPG, that is the Angolan oil and gas regulator, that explained a little bit of how space technology is impacting their activities regarding to their environment impact monitoring and also projects for new exploration and how it could make them more efficiently. So I would like to know, in your perspective and Sansa work in South Africa, how you are leveraging geospatial technology to support socioeconomic development and evidence-based policy making.
No, thank you so much, Luciano. And just to also mention that I'm leading the Earth observation program, as I mentioned previously, And then within the Earth Observation Program, I'm leading a team of research, application development scientists. I'm leading the team that is looking at the sensor portfolio, driving user needs with different government departments, and then also trying to understand what sort of satellite data they need. I've got a team as well that is looking at the systems, the Earth observation data systems, a data center, and then another unit, finally, that is working on space education. They do a lot of outreach and, public awareness. Maybe just to come to your question, why I'm mentioning all these capabilities, just to show how, we are ensuring that the space, solutions can be developed to sort of assist on the day-to-day decision-making and then also policy-making for the government. If you look at the SANSA now, we've got a strategic plan, 2025-2030, which is a 5-year strategic plan that is focusing on, 5 pillars. I won't take, because of time, I want to go through all of them, but what I want to highlight is that out of all those pillars and the strategic focus areas that we have, we want to ensure that whatever we do, contributes to inclusive economic growth, industrialization, job creation, and then also build a capable state, through the advancement of space science, engineering, and technology. Then when you look at this impact statement, it starts telling us that whatever we need to do with the geospatial, solutions that we develop, it has to be, one, on part of the industrial development, being able to create opportunities, to create jobs that sort of solve the problems that we face within the country. And number 2, we need to be able to respond to the challenges that we are facing in the country. This is why out of all those pillars in the next 5 years, we said we want to look at space science, Earth observation, research, development and innovation, and Earth intelligence. Why I'm mentioning Earth intelligence is because this is the direction where, the geospatial solutions will start making sense to the user. In other words, we're moving from just creating maps. Previously, we just create maps and give the users to interpret, or sometimes train them to interpret. But now we're now taking, these geospatial solutions to the next level, where when we say they are smart, it means that they need to be integrative in nature. In other words, we need to start developing the Earth intelligence tools, or what we call decision support tools, as part of, again, responding to the strategy that we put up, strategic plan that we put upon ourselves in South Africa. We also recognize that, it's very important that we start looking at decision support tools for different thematic areas, assisting in issues related to agriculture, precision agriculture, with the dynamic nature that we have today. You don't even know when to plant. We need to be able to create the tools that assist on, assisting the farmers to say, when do I plant? And then therefore, we need to have follow-up policies that sort of, assist in securing food security, given the changes that we're facing today. And then one other important thing is that if we want these tools, the other one is the disaster, of course. We've got quite a number of the tools that are lined up, water and so forth, looking at water quality, being able to predict what sort of water you will have in the future. That assists a lot in developing all those, evidence-based type of decision-making. And then the last part that I just want to say is that when you start looking at the group on Earth observation, talking about the post-2025 strategy, Earth intelligence for all, what they're trying to say is that we need to start co-creating solutions with the users. And then the users need to tell us exactly what they need, but when we develop, we need to develop with them so that they can easily use that, whatever intelligence, we are using. Today, we've got like multiple sources of data. Smart geospatial solutions is when you are able to start looking at Earth observation data, socioeconomic data, and any other ancillary data that is required to respond to, specific challenges that we face today. I just wanted to say, South Africa, through its strategy, particularly the Space Agency, we are really seeing the need, and we are deliberate on trying to develop various tools that respond to different challenges that we face. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Prof. After this, I would say, institutional approach that Prof. Abel explained us on how South Africa is developing solutions, I would like to hear more about from Jean-Louis on Airbus perspective as an industrial company. How this geospatial solution can be, how the solution you have, and how they are helping governments, industries to accelerate this digital transformation. If you can also provide some practical uses or cases where these solutions are being implemented, we would appreciate.
Okay, so the question is how the geospatial industry can help the country to
how satellite-based geospatial solutions, Airbus particular case, are helping governments and the industry to accelerate this digital transformation.
Okay. With the service that we provide at Airbus Space Digital, which is the name of my business unit, you can basically address a satellite imagery service, you can basically address 4 main use cases. The first one is mapping. So it has been mentioned. Mapping is very important for an emerging country because you need a very good referential to know where are your assets, where are your people, where are your infrastructure. So that's the first use case addressed with satellite imagery and geospatial services. The second use case is monitoring. And with satellite imagery service, you very easily fulfill this kind of expectation of revisiting a specific location on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on even a daily basis sometimes. And here you have multiple applications. Obviously, you have application in defense, which is one of our main market, but you have also civilian application, many civilian application. For monitoring, we can think about urban development, which is very quick in emerging country, and where you need to have a frequent update of the city mapping. So that's where fresh data and updated data are very important. So monitoring is used in agriculture as well, because to assess the crop health, you need along the vegetation cycle provide several acquisition and information all along the vegetation cycle until the harvest. So just to give you some example, you have many applications with monitoring. The third use case is mission preparation. Mission preparation with, for instance, the capacity to provide digital elevation model. It's mainly used for engineering when you need to proceed to pre-assessment of an engineering project, for instance, in road construction, in railway construction, to prepare flight mission. So this is the third use case. And the last use case, the fourth use case that I have in mind, helping also emerging countries to develop geoinformation application, is emergency, obviously. And with satellite imagery, we provide to our customer access to imagery service with the highest priority. So, for instance, you can choose to acquire an image on a specific location on a specific day, you can choose to get an image as fast as possible, meaning that if you order an image today, you will get it on your desk tomorrow. So we can be as reactive as that. And for emergency situation, obviously, this is to assess a crisis, to assess when you need imagery very quickly. This is a critical asset for sure. So, and we had a recent example with flooding situation in Angola, for instance. So for this kind of, facing this kind of situation, we are able also with Airbus services to provide information in a reactive manner to the people who are in charge of search and rescue, for instance.
Okay. Now I would pass for Selina. Jean-Louis highlights several examples or use cases where geospatial data can be used. And you mentioned in your introduction the fact that you are investing in the mining sector. Can you talk more on how you are using geospatial data for mining sectors and how geospatial data can be used, for example, for emerging countries to raise funds for certain projects for investments?
Yeah, I appreciate that, that question. And, you know, I will say from a raising fund perspective, geospatial data can actually make a project more bankable because you can't govern or you can't raise funds around what you can't see. So the ability for a country to have knowledge of what's within their boundaries is very powerful. What we're seeing from the mining sector, and this is primarily work that's been done in Botswana and in Democratic Republic of Congo right now. You know, Democratic Republic of Congo is a great example because from their mining assets, they could be one of the richest countries in the world. But they lack the knowledge of actually what's in the ground. So using geospatial data and primarily a number of different sensors that are fused together. And I think the gentleman from South Africa brought up a really good point. You really have to identify what it is that you're solving for and what sensor you need for that. Not all space-based data will solve every challenge. So in the case of mining, we need a hyperspectral sensor, we need a LiDAR sensor, we will also probably need a SAR sensor because of the cloud cover. So you really need a data management strategy as you're looking to solve these problems in what country. And from the mining sector, we've had, and using AI, by the way, I don't think we could have done this 5-10 years ago. AI really has changed the game when it comes to geospatial data. But, you know, we're able now to do abundance mapping and for early exploration, identify rare earth and critical minerals that we didn't know were in the ground, you know, 10, 20, 30 years ago. This is very powerful for a country to leverage that knowledge and then being able to raise funds and encourage foreign direct investment based on that knowledge and invest in the country. It also goes across not only in the mining sector, but, you know, it goes across into infrastructure. Here in Angola, I would say the Libido Corridor is a great example of where geospatial services can be used to map out rail, agricultural products, artisanal mining sites that may affect the Libido Corridor. There's many different things that it can look at and provide value back to the country. But again, you can't govern what you can't see. So I think that's the power in the geospatial data.
Okay, thank you for your answer. I would like to address my question now to Rama. Selina spoke a little bit on how the need of data management, different type of data that can be used. And I would like to ask to you how emerging space and satellite technology can transform the way of developing countries are assessing and use the space technology?
Yeah, so I think there's a few ways to think about this. I think, firstly, it depends what you want to own, right? In the current way folks have been thinking about space is about vertical integration. How do I put together my own assets, put them in orbit, own the asset, create my own comms protocols, have my asset decay and rinse and repeat, right? And then maybe sell data from there. And a lot of time, African countries in general, including my own, I'm from Kenya, like historically have spent a lot of time buying data from other folks, right? And now there's an opportunity for us to, firstly, because the cost of launch has decreased significantly, to be able to put up our own assets more and more. And I love that the Angolan Space Agency, the GGPEN folks, do like take that very seriously. And then on top of that, also own our own launch facilities, right? Which is becoming more and more of a practice as well, where folks are really putting effort into that realm. But of course, the other thing that we can do is that we can leapfrog a lot of the ways that folks have dealt with the space industry before, right? If you look at the place that we are in as a business, as a satellite, what we do when we assessed the market, it was actually 4 years ago when I first presented the concept. At the time, I was calling it Space Cloud as a Service, and I was going to do like orbital data centers, right? Like full stack, build the data centers themselves and launch them into orbit. But after thinking it through for a couple of years while I was still working, I think the software-first approach ended up winning out by a significant margin. And yet, right now, you see SpaceX and Google and a bunch of these folks and Axiom Space, et cetera, all pushing towards this vertically integrated, closed ecosystem, full-on hardware stack. And I think a lot of African startups, African founders, et cetera, can actually look at this as a way to get into the space industry without having to have this massive CapEx investment. Like a huge chunk of the space industry will fall on the software, on the AI side of things. So if you can find ways to get involved in that, right, you can actually make a significant dent in the market. If you look at SpaceX's S1, their $27 trillion of their TAM is in enterprise AI services, right? Whether or not you believe that stuff, you probably shouldn't, right? But it just goes to show actually that the software services, that there's real opportunities there as well. And we can solve for a lot of our own issues, right? We can solve for reduction of unwanted data before it actually comes down to the ground. We can solve for autonomy of ground station to cloud service provider movement of data. We can solve for that entire path, even to looking into deep space exploration, looking into lunar exploration, and into assessments of how the impacts of climate change, where Africa will be hit the hardest. Like, there's so many different things we can do without necessarily having to put in that hard CapEx investment that usually you've got to do in the space industry historically. So think about things differently than how everyone else is doing it, and I think that's a good path to start off with.
Okay, thank you. And Brian, for you, a question. Based on your experience with Africa, Angola, and Jedi, what are the key challenges and the opportunity to implement these technology driving development projects in these emerging markets?
Thank you, Luciano. So challenges, I see three big ones. Technology and actually sort of the physical CapEx investment I don't see as a major problem, but rather building the ecosystem around that technology. We have a very robust kind of physical infrastructure, terrestrial infrastructure for mobile communications in the country. But I think the lasting impact of that will be how we bring consumers into the use of that from a cost perspective, from a a learning perspective, from a usefulness perspective. So not just having the technology or having the sort of being close to a physical signal, but having the options, having the information, having the awareness, and having the right kind of business model that allows people to want to use that. I think more than 80% of the people in sub-Saharan Africa now live close to a mobile telecommunications signal. But you see penetration rates in terms of actual usage, it's still hovering around 50%. So it's not so much the physical technology, but building the ecosystem around that. The other side of that, which is the second challenge, is the last mile problem. So the economics of the last mile problem are brutal. So that's other 20%, reaching people in the very rural areas to bring them into sort of the overall connectivity ecosystem is a significant challenge. Third challenge is I kind of see this like a value chain dynamic. So my colleagues have mentioned that there is an abundance of opportunity in terms of application of geospatial intelligence, but how much of the work and how much of the data is actually used and processed in country? So do we have platforms for data that's collected in Angola to be analyzed by platforms that are developed in Angola, right? Software as a service opportunities from Angolan companies. So the opportunity I see, especially for problems 2 and 3, we've addressed, and we are addressing through our partnership with JEDI. So matching a satellite connectivity with our own terrestrial physical infrastructure on the ground is one of our long-term play for being able to reach even the most remote areas prior to the actual physical build-out of a network. So as long as we can make the economics work, as long as we can provide a countrywide connectivity solution, I think we are addressing that. Secondly, the geospatial intelligence applications that we're developing in JEDI and continue to develop, that's sort of preserving our own data sovereignty so that the data that we're collecting from satellite imagery, both collected from GGPen and from other third-party sources, we're using and processing and keeping that value here in the country. So that's kind of the challenges and the opportunities, and that's why we're, one of the reasons why we're so passionate about the JEDI partnership.
Okay. I think one of the points, and if I could summarize on our discussion, is the idea that satellites, geographic information system, AIs, Internet of Things, connectivities, just produce impact when they help governments, business, and community to take better decisions. So I would do a question for all the members of the panel. What would be your recommendations to make that the development of smart geospatial solutions can effectively provide impact for governments, for business, for communities? I would start for Hama.
So a very easy question then. Ooh-wee. So I think, firstly, like having conferences like these are always useful, right? I think the most important side of this equation is in actually providing the information, right? Finding ways to get folks who you otherwise wouldn't have known would have had an impact on, well, the information would have had an impact on them to actually have access to that is always useful, which is why I'm always willing to go out to conferences where I think that there could be some value add and some impact in communities that you know, are trying to do something useful. I think that's a start. I think a lot of the space industry is very dependent on government, right? Like at least in most of the world, and even in America, right? Like the government, U.S. government is the biggest buyer of most space services and most space goods, etc. And this goes throughout the rest of the world, really, still. And so the government being deeply involved in the education, but also in the provision of space services and making as much of it as openly free as possible to its fellow citizens, that's super important, right? I think the fact that we all have some sort of GNSS services, like whether it be GPS or otherwise, like that's had a profound impact in society every day. Almost every single one of us here uses some sort of GNSS service in literally everything that we do, directly tied into your smartphone, etc. So I think where governments can actually get involved in that way, that's super useful. But it also, the onus is also on the commercial sector to do their very best to strip government as much as possible from being the only players in town, right? I think the commercial sector is really good at competition. And so for folks here, right, if you're thinking about building something or you have started building something, like that is great. If you're thinking about building something, you should just build the thing, right? Like start whichever way you can, because that does start to drive some impact. Because these days, I can't think of many like real African space startups. And we need to have more of them because there's so much opportunity, and there's an opportunity for us to have that impact, because I can think of a lot of African aerospace engineers and space engineers that I know personally, right? But for them to build that startup, it's always there's some friction there. There's not really an opportunity. They don't see that path, right? So driving that path forward. I think I've answered your question, more or less. Yeah? No? Okay.
I would make the same question for Selena. You can do this for governments, for business, for society, or you can just focus on business if you want, how this can impact.
Thank you. I have options. I'll first start on when I first got into the space industry, and it was some time ago. One of the criticisms I actually had around geospatial data is that it was only accessible to an elite part of the population. I find that the space industry is kind of very snobbish, and we tend to not look at that last mile that you talked about, and that is the hardest component. How do you get the data to the farmer in Kenya who speaks Swahili, who's never seen a SAR image? And we all know up here, SAR data is really, really hard. So let alone for the other 5 billion of us that have never touched or seen a geospatial image. So I think there needs to be a bridging between the user and those of us in the space industry to make it make sense for the end user, so that everyone is willing, to get involved and see the value in using geospatial data. And I think that starts with, at the national level, like a national hero, like Gigi Penn. I mean, they have really taken the initiative, and with the AfriCell partnership, I have to commend you on that. And, showing how geospatial data is accessible to all. And then I think where it's relevant to Africa, and I think this is the advantage that Africa has over the rest of the world, is that we leapfrog because we have this youth bulge going on here in Africa that can embrace the use of the geospatial data and come up with their own ideas and own uses rather than that being told by other countries. So I'm really encouraged by the youth in Africa and how they're going to be using some of these tools in the future. And I think that's a ground up. I think the Swahili, I want to hear from the Swahili farmer on how they integrate geospatial data into their end use, not necessarily us up here on the stage telling them how to use the data.
Thank you. Jean-Louis?
Yeah, well, I will maybe repeat what Selena just said, but in my opinion, there are three main drivers to develop let's say, to develop benefits for the society with geospatial industries. The first one is infrastructure. You need good communication infrastructure, you need a network, you need bandwidth, you need the computers, that's quite, data centers, that's obvious. This is related to also digital economy, but geospatial industry is a good example and derivative of digital economy. So that's the first driver. Then you, to develop useful geoinformation service, it seems to be obvious, but you need data. You need structured data, and that's what can be brought by satellite imagery or the drone industry. For that, geospatial activity provide a lot of information, a lot of data, and the third driver is obviously the people and the skilled people that can analyze this data. And I agree fully with Selena when she said that it's very important to make this data accessible to the people. Because actually to develop capacity, to develop skills, you need to learn by doing. That's the best way, and for that, you need to make the data accessible to the people. So infrastructure is key for that, telecommunication infrastructure, for instance. Well, that's exactly what Angola has done with satellite communication and then an Earth observation satellite. This is also what you are going to do with the community of practice. So providing proof of concept to different people, even in remote location, and enabling them to have other ideas about their own development at local level. And then it's true that you have these three drivers, three prerequisites, you can start develop applications that are useful for the country.
Okay, thank you. I will change a little bit the questions for Prof. Abel and Brian, because I think we are converging on the thoughts of what is needed to make impact. But I like it, the three first answers, and the question of last mile. We inaugurate today the Observa Mais project, where it's a project where the Angolan government, by Mintix, is providing to communities the infrastructure for people to be, the infrastructure and the softwares and the information for communities to be able to use space tech on their thematics such agriculture, climate actions, or urban planning, and others. And related to, but the main challenge, I would appreciate Brian answering that, because on JEDI perspective, for example, one of the key challenges that we faced on the beginning for us to translate how technical guys will translate what we are doing. And for Observa Mais project, one of the things is a small thing that we needed to translate it, NDVI. NDVI stands for Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, that will provide the information about crop health. But when I will go to the communities, I cannot, no one will understand NDVI. No one will understand satellite imagery, band combinations. Even if I have the data, even if I have the infrastructure there, but people need to use that to have impact on their lives. What would be your thoughts or your recommendations for us, how we can really have impact on this last mile the people that need the information to take better decision on their daily life. I think my question has become more harder than I left that for Brian and for Prof. Abel to answer.
Not a problem. I mean, we're in business to help solve problems, and I think that's kind of at the core of the answer as well. There's a whole new set of vocabulary that goes with this new industry, and we're pushing the boundaries of technology that is fairly young, a source of data that's fairly new. But I think from a commercial perspective, if you frame it in terms of how we can help a farmer, a small or large-scale farmer, solve a problem, how can they use this technology to fix something that or to help them overcome a challenge? And that answer is going to be slightly different from a large-scale commercial agriculture concern versus a small-scale farmer. I'm just looking at it from my own industry. We've started to use for network planning, GIS mapping, and multi-layered GIS mapping to determine where we should place our new sites. So layered mapping to look at roadways, to look at settlements, to look at sort of physical populations and where they move. So as we are using that technology to solve a problem, to gain competitive advantage, I think when you start to see some sort of first movers that are using the technology, then others will start to follow, just because it will become a necessary part of their strategy. The other answer I would have to this is the more, and we're agreeing with you again, Selena, that the more we democratize and make data available, I think the more new kind of entrepreneurial spirits will start to enter into that space. I had the opportunity to speak at ISPTEC maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and the ideas that came from the students, and these are mostly students studying computer science, technology, AI, there were 5 or 6 bankable, I mean, I started with investment banking, so I'm thinking, wow, these are 4 or 5 bankable projects that I would love to put these guys in front of any number of VC firms. But they were looking at sort of non-space related. But I think as more spatial data, geospatial data becomes available, and you kind of naturally democratize it, the entrepreneurs will start to match with that data, and they'll start to use it, and they'll start to commercialize it. So I think part of attacking it's going to be starting off with large-scale industries and then making the data available for the new entrepreneurs, the new startups, like the whole building of new startups that were across the street here. And I think that's where you'll see the kind of new engine of growth, while the larger enterprises start to use it to gain competitive advantage.
No, thank you so much, Luciano. Very interesting question. Starting from the impact to how people, are able to sort of interpret the, the information that they are given. For example, if you've got insurance, you know that the insurance sometimes will send you the message to say they are focusing the hailstorm, then put your car in the shade, By then, like in a shaded area or protective area. In other words, they are not talking about the numerical models that analyzes 200 years of data and, predict that they saw an anomaly that is wanting you to safeguard your car, but they give you the information that is actionable to say, take your car to shelter. It's the same with the farmers. We don't have, as Luciano said, we don't have to give them the jargons. They are not interested. They are not Earth observation experts. We need to demystify all those technology that we are developing for them to a very simple message that says, if you look at your farm, or the top left corner of your farm, you've got limited supply of fertilizers. Then when you apply fertilizers, you go to that area that requires more fertilizers and fertilize there only, and then perhaps fertilize a little on the other side. What you would have given the farmer there is the actionable information. Then how do we also, create the information in a way that people, can use that information is the part that I was talking about on really, co-creating the solution, listening to the user, and then tailor-making the solution to the problem that the user is talking about. Than us being excited about, our papers when I was still a director and the professor at the university. I was very excited when most of my students bring the paper. And then now when I was in the space agency, now when we need to do the innovation and the solution to the society, the question I ask, how would this output that you've created would help somebody, in the society, like a local community? Maybe just to also wrap up, as part of this idea of really co-creating insights using Earth observation, integrating it with number of ancillary data and combining that with AI for developing those insights. We've launched a program called the Natural Resources Management Program at SANSA, where we are saying that we want to take space to the community. We want to collaborate with government departments, municipalities, industry, NPOs, and all, tiers of stakeholders that can assist. For example, if you're looking at the issues of disasters, why are we occasionally getting disaster hitting? Even in South Africa now, we had another floods that is creating a lot of havoc. The question is, how do we develop the tools that can be communicated in such a way that people understand that they are not supposed to build in areas of like high flood risk areas. And then we need to show that with evidence to say, if you don't do this, if the next rain comes and there are floods, you're going to be flooded. But it shouldn't stop there. Then the municipalities need to then also, plan accordingly in ensuring that, people are not, building in wrong places. Then you can see that the tiers of stakeholders interpret the data in different ways, but the main goal is to make sure that we safeguard life, we improve the food production, people have good health, but all that needs to come from rigorous analysis, rigorous interrogation, and multiple engagement. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your answers to the questions. It's already mentioned that today start the World Cup. I don't want to to occupy more and you lose the game. I have just 5 minutes. I don't know if the audience have some questions. We have, I think, time to answer 2 questions if people want to do it. Okay, I think we have someone there that want to do a question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we are one of the startups that is powered by GGPN. We take connectivity in very, very, very remote area, really remote. So I have a question related to that now, or I have actually 2 questions. So the first one is a little bit more generic, and any one of you can take it. Now geospatial technology is becoming more and more accessible. How do you think that African countries can ensure that we are not only users of geospatial data, but also we are contributor to its creation, to its analysis, and commercialization? The second one, I will address it to Ms. from AfriCell. Like in my case, as I told you what we're doing, how can geospatial technology help government private operator like us, a small startup, try to make better decision on where to invest in connectivity infrastructure so that we get the greatest social and economical impact. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Who want to take the first one? Or we start with Brian for the second one? Brian, you can start.
So in terms of the location, where you focus your attention, where you focus your capital, and business in general is sort of a series of educated bets, right? So to try to minimize that risk, we try to incorporate as many sources of data as possible. So just again, using Africell as an example, if we use satellite imagery to identify the optimal areas in terms of population rates, clusters, and layering that with the right kind of social and economic data, wrapping that with an AI sort of analytical solution, right? We make sure that we have the highest quality information from multiple areas, so we have sort of a constellation of both GIS information, of on-the-ground sort of primary data collected from economic studies, from demographic studies, and then we analyze that using the right kinds of tools. Right? This is how we kind of make our capital decisions. So the extent to which you are making data-driven decisions based upon real, empirical, verified data, you're making fewer and fewer kind of less educated bets, more educated bets, and you have a higher likelihood of having the right kind of outcome. And now the tools are so accessible that you can develop, even in-house, your own kind of solutions to constantly monitor, to keep analyzing the decisions that you're making, so you can sort of check your KPIs, check your progress, and to determine, is this really the right place to put my effort, right place to put my capital, and am I serving the markets that I originally intended and set out to? That's our formula.
Cool. And I'm happy to touch on the first bit. What was the question? The guy who asked the question, so I can look. There we go. So I can look at you while I answer. All right. I think the first bit. For me, actually, one of the coolest things that happened last year was the advent of DeepSeek. Right. I think it really changed how people looked at the sort of the AI industry and how you could actually build foundational AI. Right? Instead of having to build everything from scratch, you could use foundational AI to train your own model, right? And sort of a cheat code, right? To starting things on your own. And I think in that same way, we can actually take that as a sort of like a point of presence, if you will, or like as a starting point for us. Is, well, we don't really have to go out reinventing the wheel for basically anything. Right? I think ownership of the data is definitely important, but if you have access to the data, the utilization thereof and the transformation of it is actually also equally important for a lot of folks. A lot of people don't know what to do with that data. I think Selena spoke about synthetic aperture radar data, for example, which is super high density, super complex. Like if you know what to do with it, like that's super useful as well, right? Like you can have a massive impact in communities in your market, and that's high density data, multispectral data that you can use for your own ends as well. So as long as you've got that access, but getting that access is of course important. Where in some cases we have to pay, and that's a gated. There's gated access, but then you have folks like GGPen who are putting up their own satellites, right? That can go out there and do things, right? Like with depth and have full ownership and custody of that data as well. So I think being at places like this and making the right connections with folks who actually will have that access and can provide that is super, super useful.
Okay. I don't know if Prof. Abel wants to contribute on the answer. If not.
Yeah, no, just a quick one. Yeah, if on the part where you were saying, how do you take, geospatial solutions to commercial? How do you commercialize that? Was that the question, right? The first one? Yes. Yeah, I think for me, I would just give you a short answer to say, I think you need to create, the solution that the users need that will change, the lives of the users, and then we need to make sure that whatever solution you are developing, the users are also willing to pay. Then I think that's where you can take it to. You can develop a solution that can go to the next level. But of course, the development of solutions, the colleagues already outlined that we need to always develop the business case first. What we are also doing in South Africa, the part of the startups you might have heard on the previous panel, we are also supporting the startups specifically for developing unique EO solutions that can eventually be taken to market. But of course, as they are developing those solutions, they are taken through a number of, through incubation, but number of training on how they can take that solution, to the next level. And there are a lot of opportunities, for the youth when you start looking at, taking geospatial, solution to the next level. No, thanks.
Thank you. And I would just ask for Selina just to help us to conclude our panel in 1 minute with last words.
Well, thank you. Actually, that question actually brought up more of a deeper conversation that I think needs to happen is around data sovereignty. So what part of the data pipeline does somebody actually own? Do they own the data in the raw form, or is it in the model form, or in the analytical form? And I think this is going to be a conversation that happens as we move forward in talking about, especially here in Africa, who owns the data. But I'll just say in regard to geospatial being used for mapping, I think the future here again on the continent is that I look forward to Africans mapping out Africa, that Africans know what their resources are here instead of others mapping Africa. So, and with that, thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank our panelists for the panel and our audience to be with us until this hour. I think we'll be in time to see the match. So thank you, everyone.